Hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. Hope you had a good lunch wherever you are, or maybe a late afternoon snack if you're here on the East Coast with us. I'm pleased to share the stage, or this virtual stage, with Tim Ramsey from the U.S. Department of Energy Water Power Technologies Office and my colleague Damian Kunko from SMI. Today, we are hopefully going to give you some perspectives on the WPTO program planning for the next several years, along with a discussion on what resources it will have to implement those plans. I also hope to plan to touch on some events that took place over the past year I believe are significant for marine energy commercialization efforts here in the United States. So I'm not going to talk any longer for right now. I'm going to hold my comments until after we defer to Mr. Ramsey from DOE. So Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, OREC, for having me here. I do look forward to this event every year, and it always comes in beautiful time of year, September. Wish we could be in Oregon, but it's still a nice time year across the year. But as I was preparing for this session and kind of giving the update from DC, and also being the fiscal year end ends next Thursday on September 30th, I was kind of just taking a step back and looking at all the work that's been done over the past year, all the kind of the highlights that we at the WPTO have worked on over the last year, and that's what I wanted to go through today. I wanted to go through some of the highlights, and not not to showcase us or showcase the work that WPTO is doing, but rather that's a reflection of the work going on in industry. Most of these highlights I want to run through. You've heard throughout the week this week, or at least a number of them you've heard. But really, when you look at it in context, when you look at it, the whole grouping together, it's amazing the work that the industry has done, and that WPTO was able to support this year. And again, it's a reflection of the industry and the progress of the industry. So I want to start with foundational research and development. We've really upped our work in foundational R&D this past year. In particular, working a lot in materials. We've been working for maybe a year and a half on our materials strategy. We've had a number of webinars and workshops this past year. We have the final one, the fourth one, coming up on October 5th. So last plug, if you haven't signed up for that, I definitely encourage anyone that's interested to sign up for that workshop to sign up. We've done work in modeling, WEXIM in particular. That's one I wanted to highlight. We've updated some codes in WEXIM, making it more user-friendly and more compatible with industry and users. We updated our resource report. It's been a number of years since we've updated our resource assessments. We published that earlier this year, and that provides a very concise and consolidated overview of the United States marine energy resources. Controls, continue to advance our work in controls. We have a project at Portland State. They completed control testing for their project this year, as well as components. Aqua Harmonics has been testing at the Sandia SWEP Lab, so Sandia is using their SWEP Lab more and more. Columbia Power testing out at NREL on their dyno, getting ready to move the system out to Hawaii for testing. We stood up Seedlings a little over a year ago and continue to fund that in fiscal year 20. Seedlings is a new program that we started, meant to be exploratory research at our national labs, kind of scratching it, see if there's a bear there. We had the first ever Seedling Showcase earlier this year, a few weeks ago. A number of you, I think, probably attended that. But we're setting ourselves up for the future as well. You've heard us talk a lot about UMARC this week. So last year, fiscal year 20, we ran the first university foundational research funding opportunity in many years, selected 7 projects out of that first topic area that made need of the funding opportunity, and just finalized those last awards this past week. So those projects are now up and running. We have the UMARC, the University Marine Energy Research Community, up and running, and they're going to help us to organize and coordinate all of the university research that we're funding across the U.S. going forward. So a lot more to come in our foundational work. But the reason that we do the foundational work, and it's such a priority in the program, is we see that as a base for industry to build off of. So we want to complete that foundational work, that cross-cutting work, but get it out to industry, eventually transfer it out to industry so that they can build on it and apply it to their systems. So we had a lot of system design, validation, and testing work progress in 2021. Vernon Power and ORPC are probably the two most visible in that area. And I think we're hearing from Vernon next. We heard from those that attended the All Centers meeting earlier this week, heard from Jonathan, but Vernon tested in the East River, their half-scale prototype, their tri-frame. EMET completed an independent power performance assessment in January. That was the first of its kind. They have a current power agreement with ComEd. They successfully did a retrieve and replace back in May, where they pulled it out. They replaced some of the blades with a thermoplastic blades developed by NREL. And over the course of the test, they generated over 300 megawatt hours with 90% availability, which is a new record for U.S. marine energy generation. LRPC out in Alaska, working with the Yagi Village Council. They had deployed back in September 2019. They operated, throughout 2020, throughout 2021. They're currently the longest operating current energy converter in the U.S. They're working already on deploying another device supported by the Office of Indian Energy in the fall, I believe later this year. And also CalWave, I think we're going to hear from CalWave next as well. They just deployed their fifth scale device out at Scripps Pier just, I think last week, I think September 16th officially is when they deployed out at Scripps, and they're already working on their designs for their next generation device to test out at PacWave. We have our ongoing work with our prizes, the Waves to Water Prize, the Ocean Observation Prize. We recently announced the 5 finalists for the final drink stage of the Waves to Water Prize. In the Ocean Observation Prize, they moved into the build stage, the second of 3 stages. So the build stage is open now with plans for the final splash stage next year. ETIP, that's another program that we launched over the past year. That's a multi-office cross-cutting program aiming to assist remote and disadvantaged communities. So ETIP Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project. That's a project that we've working on with a number of different offices that we selected and finalized the scope last year, and we went out with the first selection of the communities, the first cohorts through ETIP. So 11 communities were selected, and they're going to be working on a 12 to 18 month project to scope kind of the energy needs in the community and what that might look like for energy independence and resiliencies for those 11 remote communities. SBIRs, we're continuing to work in SBIRs. We have really increased our focus in SBIRs over the last couple of years, but including last year in fiscal year 21, going well above the mandated minimum tax for SBIRs, in particular supporting tech development and PBE applications and co-designs. Speaking of competitions, we released the biggest tech development FOA in the history of the program this past year. It's $27 million for R&D and testing at PacWave. That's currently open right now. Final applications are due October 5th. But with all the technology development, that naturally rolls into test infrastructure. So if we want to advance these technologies, advance them towards commercialization, we need to provide test infrastructure, world-class test infrastructure, as well as access to that test infrastructure. So we saw a lot of work continue in FY21 around test infrastructure, reducing barriers to testing and access to infrastructure. So probably most notably is PacWave. You heard earlier Dan give a very great, thorough overview of PacWave. A lot of accomplishments were hit in 2021. BOEM approved the lease in February, and the final FERC permit was issued in March. They broke ground, actually started construction in June. They're doing the HDD right now, I believe. 2 of the 4 bores are complete, getting ready to install the conduit, and operations are scheduled to begin in 2023. AMEC, the Atlantic Marine Energy Center, we also finalized the award to bring on a new Marine Center this year to complement the existing three. So it's the first time we brought it on a new Marine Center in many, many years, and that was done with support from Congress. And AMEC, I think, just awarded last week officially, so they're officially off and running, but they're aimed at conducting research in both grid, but with also a focus on PBE and cross-cutting topics such as storage and integration and microgrids and supply chain analysis. And we're also going to be looking to AMEC in particular to play a role in marine energy workforce development, developing curriculum for the marine energy industry and academia, organizing short courses and workshops, and really helping to train and mentor our next generation of scientists and engineers in the marine energy industry. Teamer, Matt earlier today gave a very great overview of Teamer as well, and both Packwave, AMEC, our Marine Centers are all part of the Teamer network as well. We've completed 3 RFTSs to date, the request for technical support. RFTS 4 is open right now. The network is up to, I believe, 33 facilities, over 80 unique lab capabilities or unique testing capabilities across those 33 facilities. To date, we've supported 53 projects or requests for technical support. So 53 projects were selected so far, which is already more than half of our target objective of 100 projects already. And as I mentioned, RFTS 4 is open right now. But we're always looking to bring on new testing capabilities, not just across the industry, but when possible, bring those into the Teamer network as well. This past year, we brought on additional testing capabilities at our national labs. 5 new projects were selected. The LAMP, the Large Amplitude Motion Platform at NREL. FIRE, the Fast Iteration Research and Evaluation Wave Tank at NREL. Power takeoff and mooring lines reliability testing at SINDIA, hybrid research vessel at PNNL, a cabled research array for the blue economy at PNNL, and also started the preliminary analysis looking at the feasibility of a deepwater MHK shakedown tank at SINDIA. So just started on those projects this year. When those facilities are online, those will all be part of the Teamer network as well. Triton also made some great progress this year, and the Triton field trial is trying to demonstrate environmental monitoring technologies as well as gather some of that environmental data that's needed to inform the permitting and regulatory process. 9 field tests have been completed to date. I think 8 of those took place in 2021. And speaking of permitting and regulatory process, we have our ongoing work with Kearns and West. They're working to develop the permitting toolkit for the marine energy technologies to better assist both developers and regulators when citing and permitting marine energy technologies. And we have data access and analytics. Every time we're funding our projects and completing these projects, we're trying to get as much information out of those projects as possible, disseminated, aggregated in a way that is most useful to industry. So we've input a lot more information into the Primer website and database, as well as the TESIS database. We continued work on our techno-economic and analysis, metrics development, standard development, brought on some more standards, published standards, and continue to work in STEM and workforce. Probably most notably our OREC Fellowship Graduate Research Program and the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. For those that attended the All-Center meeting earlier this week, the very first session kicked off with the MHA Graduate Student Fellowship Research Program run out of OREC, and that's a program that I've been really happy with and the success of that program, and it's great to see the students get to further their research. So, I mean, those were just some of the highlights for fiscal year 21. That's just, like I said, just some of them. We did a lot more work, and by the way, we did all of that while living through a pandemic and also working through an administration change. So when you kind of sit back and look at it in its totality, it's pretty amazing the work that was completed over this past year. And again, I don't say that to pat ourselves on the back, but really just reflect and just be a litmus test for the work that's going on and the progress going on in the green energy industry. But our work is never done. Our work is not done. We're already looking into fiscal year 22, trying to build on those highlights, build on those successes, and keep driving, our work forward and keep driving the progress forward in the industry towards commercialization. So looking forward to what's next in fiscal year 22. And speaking of the administration change, you all probably know that the new administration is very supportive of renewable energy. They have very ambitious renewable energy goals: 100% clean energy by 2030, net zero greenhouse gas emission economy by no later than 2050. And as we're looking to the work we're doing in 2022, we're trying to see how, in general, we can prioritize our work to support those goals, to advance and fully fund innovative green energy R&D, build on our work, provide technical assistance, especially in climate impacted communities, and ensure programs across the portfolio also increase equity and diversity and extend our STEM efforts and our next generation water power workforce. Looking at the budget, it looks like we'll continue to have very good support. The fiscal year 22 budget request was the highest in the history of the program at $112 million, and that is $3 million more than the 21 enacted level of $109 million. The House mark for 22 is also very strong at $106 million, and the Senate came in at $142 million. So regardless what scenario we end up with in the final appropriations and final language, it is looking likely that we'll have strong support and we can continue to build off of these successes in 2021. And then also, probably a number of you have heard about the Bilateral Infrastructure Bill, the BIB. If that were to go through, that would be an additional $110.4 million on top of our annual appropriations. And of that 110, 40 million of that would be directed or carved out specifically for the marine centers, and then the other 70.4 for marine energy in general. So regardless of what finally shapes out in fiscal year 22, it's pretty clear that we're going to have strong support and a lot of work to do. So we're going to, some of the other products that we want to get out in fiscal year 22, we've been working for a number of years on our MYPP, our multi-year program plan, as well as a recently started a testing infrastructure roadmap led at our national lab. So those are two products that we're looking to get done or at least make significant progress on this year, hoping to get the MYPP released maybe later this calendar year or early next. But regardless, we'll be using those products to help inform our decision making and prioritize some of our work going forward in fiscal year 22. We know we'll continue our work in our foundational R&D area. I mentioned UMERC. One of the big reasons of bringing UMERC, that facilitator, on board was to help us to organize that foundational research going on across a university landscape and help inform the program, help collect and organize and leverage all the work going out there to help inform the program on those needs going forward. We're likely going to have additional support for our university specifically. We want to have a more transparent, better cadence of support for universities in the foundational R&D landscape. And we'll be building off of the recent awards that were just announced as well, and those will be continue to work and actually execute in fiscal year 22. We're going to continue work in our resource assessments. Yes, we did just recently get that new report out, but we'll continue refining our resource assessments, in particular around PBE locations and applications for PBE. Continue to work in controls. Sundia is working with MBARI. They're going to be working on developing device agnostic controls and working with MBARI on demonstrating improving performance of a web platform, open source platform for controls. But again, all of this is with the eventual motivation of getting, supporting our developers, supporting systems, advancing systems, and getting them in the water. So looking ahead at fiscal year 22, that's going to be a big theme of getting demonstrations, getting, quote unquote, steel in the water, getting systems in the water. PackWave already mentioned, we know for sure PackWave will be coming online in a couple of years, so we'll continue to prime that pipeline for PackWave. The fiscal year 21 FOA, that one that's on the streets right now, that closes early next fiscal year, and we'll be awarding a number of projects out of that funding opportunity next year. And again, we'll continue to prime the pipeline. I mentioned Vernon and ORPC. We have a number of projects in CalWave, and we have a number of projects that we'll be deploying later in fiscal year 22. Bilateral Power, they're going to be heading out to Hawaii later in October, waiting for a weather window, as well as Columbia Power. Both those projects will be looking to deploy later this calendar year or early next at the Wave Energy Test Site in Hawaii. Also, Aqua Harmonics is scheduled to go out to Hawaii as well and initiate their in-water test later in the summer or early fall of 2022. We'll continue work on our prizes. Both the Waves to Water and the Ocean Ops Prize culminate in 2022 with their final in-water tests. Waves to Water testing at Jeanette's Pier, and the Ocean Ops Prize out at Squim and PNNL. And we're already looking at scoping the next round of prizes, as well as what are the kind of next focus areas within the PBE and use applications. Teamer will certainly continue to support Teamer. We're trying to support 2 to 4 requests for technical support a year. And with that theme of in-water testing, we're planning to bring on open water testing as part of the Teamer network. I think you heard Matt talk about that earlier. So by the end of the calendar year is the plan, maybe early next, to bring on capabilities into the Teamer network for open water testing, and that will be available through future RFTSs. ETIP, I mentioned ETIP. We selected that first cohort of communities, and in 22 we'll be looking to start scoping on the follow-on activities for that first cohort, leading to marine energy demonstrations in those ETIP-supported communities. And then, of course, again, supporting our STEM workforce, the MECC, the OREC grad program. We're looking to get that next round open. We usually try to open it in October, so probably see that next round for the MHK Grad Student Fellowship Research Program open soon. Really, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that we're planning to do in 2022, most of which I can't talk about yet. It's not public, so I was just trying to hit some of the themes and some of the highlights. But certainly, it's clear that there's going to be a lot of support in 2022. It's going to be a lot of work. Without a doubt, it's going to be daunting. But in order to make the significant progress that we want to see in the industry, really drive down costs, increase performance, it's going to take a lot of work. So I'm excited about that challenge, as daunting as it might be. I'm excited about the opportunity and really excited to see how we can do our part to meet the administration's ambitious clean energy goals. And, side benefit, we get to significantly improve people's lives along the way. So looking forward to 2022. Definitely sign up for the Water Wire. You can find out a lot more about the work that we're doing, we've done to date, and stay tuned for work for the future. So that, pass it back to you, Paul.
That was awesome. Thank you, Tim. I'm blown away, to be honest, and it's how much time I spend tracking this sector, and I can't help but be completely impressed by the work that your office is accomplishing. To think back, Damian, when this program was kind of hovering around $35 million a year for several fiscal years there, and the fact that we've been able to grow it to the point of where it is, and to hear about all the impacts you're having across so many different places in different ways. Thank you so much for that overview. I'm going to hold questions to the end. I'm going to give a few remarks here, but and then hopefully we'll create some robust conversation here, at least between the three of us, and for the other 2 people that are watching right now. So let me start by embarrassing Tim a little bit. Frankly, after hearing all that was very impressive. And I do just want to say publicly how much respect Damian and I both have for Tim as a representative of the U.S. federal government, and particularly the DOE WPTO. Really, from the honorable way in which he conducts his business, the dedication he brings to the cause, the ingenuity and creativity he utilizes to solve all these challenging problems, and the leadership he offers to the entire marine energy team. We just want to say thank you very much from all of us in the marine energy sector. We are very fortunate to have you working on our behalf. I also want to say thanks to, I'm not going to let you say anything, Tim. I'm just going to let you can say something later, but I want to publicly do that because you are truly a special federal employee, and I really mean that. I also want to say thanks to Jen Garson, who I think took over at a very difficult time, and she's really provided some amazing, terrific leadership since Alejandro was promoted earlier this year. And I would just like to say we really haven't missed a beat, to be honest. So nothing against Alejandro, but I think that says a lot about Jen. And we also appreciate the entire Water Power staff. You've got a great team. And one of the things you didn't mention, Tim, is that you've been severely understaffed. Just if you look at your FTEs that you have versus some of the other programs and how much money they have. And I think that's just a credit again to the entire team of how passionately people feel about this issue. And we're very fortunate for that. And I include the folks at the national labs. I mean, there's just some amazing talent and folks that are at multiple labs that have really given their life to try to see this come to fruition. Let me close by saying thanks to Jason, Sam, Matt, and the entire team at POET for pulling off what I've learned is the 14th Ocean Renewable Energy Conference. I know it was a disappointment for them that we were not all able to meet in person in Portland, and that's certainly true for me as well. But we'll take what we can get these days, right, folks? Thank you for all the hard work that you do and for the marine energy sector. I do want to just say a brief word about SMI. For those of you that don't know the firm that Damian and I work at here in DC, we were founded in 1993 by two engineers for the purpose of supporting technology companies and universities navigate the US government industry research and development complex. And as you all can imagine, that is a very challenging task. Our focus areas are in defense technology and manufacturing, medical tech, advanced materials, life sciences, and energy innovation, which brings us together today. We help our clients by shaping and securing federal funds, providing federal program intelligence, and enhancing client visibility and partner networking opportunities. And I should note that SMI has long taken a leadership position in DC related to supporting the marine energy sector. And maybe because we're the only firm that works on this, but in any event, we certainly have done it for a long time now. So I thought it might be worthwhile for us to quickly, and Tim, I'm going to glance over a couple of things here because you did such a great job of summarizing all the amazing activities over the past year. But I do want to talk through a few more things before we dive into the more gloomy picture here in DC right now, which matches the weather we're having in the last day or so. And I think we can all agree that even though it's been a challenging 18 months for all of us on many levels, obviously, I do also think it's been a remarkable period for marine energy commercialization efforts here in the US, as Tim just did a great job highlighting. I'm going to start by talking about passage of the Water Power R&D bill. For those of you who've heard me talk before, I've talked about it for 10 years now, and so I might as well spend a moment talking about it. You may know that Congress originally authorized the DOE to support marine energy research and development in its landmark 2007 energy legislation. I actually was still a Senate staffer myself and had floor privileges during the debate of that legislation, which was an amazing experience. Little did I know that Damian Kunko had done a sneaky little move and got a marine energy program, snuck in there, which would end up kind of dominating my life. I didn't know that at the time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was originally a 5-year authorization and for, I think, $50 million a year, right, Damian, if that sounds right?
Yep.
So $250 million over a 5-year period. We've more than doubled that now, but we'll get to that in a minute. And that lapsed actually in fiscal year 2012. And I don't know what it says about me and my capabilities as a lobbyist, but it did take us 10 years of effort to get that bill reauthorized. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici and Senator Ron Wyden, both of Oregon, who we owe an incredible debt of gratitude, but also along with several of their colleagues in the House and the Senate, including, we'll give a shout out to Senator Murkowski from Alaska, who was very important. But they were successful in having Congress pass and the prior president signed into law last December, the Water Power R&D Act. Tim referenced it. The legislation authorizes or reauthorizes the marine energy and hydropower activities of the WPTO. It authorized $137 million per year for 5 years for marine energy RD&D. And again, I want to say a special thanks to Congresswoman Bonamici, Senator Wyden, along with their terrific staff. And I do want to just take a second to give a special thanks to Maxine Sugarman, who just left Congresswoman Bonamici's office to go to law school up the road a little bit in Seattle. She was, I can just say with 100% certitude that if she had not been working on this bill, it would have not become law. So I want to give a shout out to Maxine. Also, it's funny, but Sarah Round and Eric Fitch, or just Fitch, for those of you that worked with Bonamici's office, those were Energy LAs that actually worked on that bill going back over that 10-year time period. And Damian and I worked with all three of them. I also want to give a shout out to Malcolm McGeary there in Portland, Oregon with Senator Wyden, along with Dave Barrick, who retired before we could get this bill finalized for him. I promised him we had PagWave open by the time he retired too, but I failed on both of those. Anyway, Dave Barrick and Malcolm both were critical to our success. So a shout out to the staff. They never get called out very much, but members couldn't do their jobs without great staff, right, Tim? It's true for secretaries too. So let's talk about a couple highlights. And Tim, thank you for mentioning the NREL report, because from my perspective, as we kind of were going through the early part of the year and we were heading up toward ICOE, which I'll touch on in just a second, from our perspective at NHA, that release of that report really kind of changed the dynamic and the conversation and kind of put marine energy at the table. And I realized that was all old information. I mean, maybe not all old, but it was an aggregation of previous information. And I agree with you that there's a lot of great work. It excluded basically the PBE opportunity, so it didn't talk about that. I would say that's a very conservative estimate of the potential of marine energy in the United States. And I think we can go only upwards from there. But I mean, NREL concluded that marine energy resources are significant and geographically diverse. 50 state technical resources, 2,300 terawatt hours per year. And that's 57% of total electricity generated in 2019. That's not insignificant. And if you just could capture 10% of that, that's the equivalent of powering 22 million homes. And I mean, just for comparison, for people to stop and think about that for a second, total solar generation in 2019 was 103 terawatt hours, 2% of all US electricity generation. So we're talking about an opportunity that's 3 times the size of what solar was. And of course, with solar, I mean, you can't depend on it nearly as much as you can tidal energy, for example, right? And for obvious reasons that other people have talked so eloquently about. And so I think it's a big deal. And I think it's something that we can really hang our hat on. And at NHA, we try to do that. And what was kind of nice for us was that came out. And then just a couple of weeks later, the NHA released the marine energy commercialization strategy. And I'm happy to talk about that, since that was kind of my COVID project last year, and I probably spent hundreds of hours on that thing. So please go look at it, make use of it. But that was released back in March, kind of heading up to ICOE, and it was a call to action for industry and government to take immediate and targeted steps to support commercialization of marine energy. And really, there were 2 key parts to it. The first was we released deployment targets. Pretty conservative, modest, I would say, but 50 megawatts by 2025, or 50 by 25, 500 by 2030, and 1 gigawatt of marine energy deployed in the United States by 2035. Those are not crazy goals, but I think they're substantial enough to where I think it would spark liftoff for the domestic marine energy sector. The strategy also outlined 10 specific actions for the federal policymakers to help meet the deployment targets. These actions include, for example, significant new funding for infrastructure related to distributed generation opportunities for marine energy, or new resources for DOE's Powering the Blue Economy initiative, for example. I would also like to note here that the MEC will hold a strategy session the Tuesday afternoon at NHA's Clean Currents Conference next month in Atlanta. It will focus on building a roadmap for the 50 by 25 goal, and we encourage each of you to participate in that event and help us heighten awareness of the commercialization strategy and the need for these recommended actions. That led into ICOE. After years of planning and with the great support of DOE and the Water Power Office and the MEC, we held the ICOE event in late April. And despite all of the challenges and it being 100% virtual, we did have over 450 registrants from all over the world for a program that included plenary sessions with high-level government speakers, technical sessions, poster presentations, an online exhibition hall, and virtual networking opportunities, which were fantastic. And I know Richie's out there, and Richie and I really, with EMEC, and we really had a great time, for example, at that. And I encourage those types of networking activities at all virtual conferences moving forward. And I think the content is still online, and it was extremely rich. So I encourage you to go take a look at that. And I would just highlight that Senator Murkowski, Congresswoman Bonamici, Deputy Secretary David Turk at DOE, DOE Assistant Secretary for EERE Kelly Speaks-Bachman were amongst many that spoke at ICOE. And NHA actually awarded Senator Murkowski and Congresswoman Bonamici awards for their work in support of water power technologies. And so I was very pleased that that took place. And finally, switching gears to deployments. I'm not going to spend much time on this since Tim did talk about it quite a bit. But I think that's kind of probably the most important thing that's happened. Like Tim said, steel in the water. And it really has been hard from Damian and my perspective to grow political support for the marine energy sector without having projects to show off to members of Congress and their staff. That has now changed in a big way. I know, for example, Oscilla Power just had an event or have been hosting tours of their device up in Seattle before it takes off to Hawaii. And that's a big deal for us. It's really important for members to be able to go see these devices and put their hands on them and let them know they're real. And so Tim talked about the ORPC project. I think it's really important up at Igiyagig. And I would just note that DOE Secretary Granholm was able to learn about the ORPC device and the RivGen technology on trips to both Alaska and Maine just within the past several weeks. So I'm super excited that the Secretary has had some of that in-person ability to see these technologies. Tim talked about Vernon Power, and I know they're going to talk next, so I don't want to take too much of that thunder, but I do think it's very impressive that they've produced over 300 megawatt hours of clean electricity for the Manhattan Con Edison grid, and along with the certification process. And so I think that as a model is really important. Tim mentioned Sea Power and Oscilla Power going into the Marine Corps base at Hawaii at the Wave Energy Test Site. Did not know that Calwave was in the water now, so congratulations to them. It's very exciting. And Tim mentioned PacWave, which for me, Damian and I have worked on that for over 11 years now, so it's great to see that we're finally in the construction phase of the project. I really hope that all of this ensures that marine energy is now part of the climate change solution discussion. That's where we deserve to be. Sometimes I've thought over the last few years we may not reach that point, but I think we're getting super close. So switching gears now and looking forward a little bit and talking about DC a little more. Tim did mention the budget, and I would highlight that just for a moment. And as a reminder for everyone, I think Tim mentioned this, but the WPTO is funded right now for the fiscal year that's has about 8 or 9 days left in it, maybe a little less, is $150 million with 109 million. I thought it was 109 million for marine energy, Tim. I'll check my numbers, sorry about that.
That's right, yeah, 109 for marine energy. Sorry, my numbers I was quoting was just marine energy.
Okay, and so, we were, and I want to underline this, incredibly pleased. And I think it says a significant amount of, it's a lot of credit to Tim and his team that the fact that the president proposed a funding level that was higher than Congress had provided the year before. And I mean, that has never happened since I left the Hill in 2008 and started working on these issues that year. And we've never, for a Republican or a Democrat president, request Congress to fund the water office or the water program before there was a water office at a level higher than Congress had funded it the year before. And so it says a lot about you and Jen and the team and the work that you're doing and the successes that we're starting to see. So I want to give a lot of credit there. I would note, it's not always good news. There was a substantial increase proposed for the water office this year, almost all of that on the hydropower side. And so we'll get back to that in a minute. So what I'd also note that Congress has made a significant progress toward completing funding for DOE for FY22, which does start on October 1st, and hopefully they would have made some more by now, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The House approved the FY22 Energy and Water Development Appropriations Bill over the summer, and the Senate has only managed to get their E&W bill out of the committee, but that's good enough for me. We can see the numbers. So the House approved record funding levels for the WPTO, as Tim mentioned, at a total of $175 million, along with important language on program direction. It's quite a bit of it, actually, probably the most we've ever seen for sure. However, all the increase, like I said, in the House bill too, is also targeted at hydropower investments for a total of $69 million. So right now, my math says $106 million for marine energy, but we can check on that, Tim. We'll get our numbers straightened out later.
My math
the Senate, in the Senate, it's a little bit better news. Senate decided to go ahead and go with the full presidential request, which is fantastic. But again, what they did is they decided to kind of mess with the House a little bit, I think, which is kind of historically our power base has been in the Senate. And so $142 million of that total of 196 is targeted at marine energy. So Damian and I are now focusing on trying to merge those two together and figure out what that final directive report language could look like. And so that's kind of our target over the next weeks, months, however long Congress decides to drag this out. Damian, can I throw it over to you for just a second here to talk about Navy funding for marine energy? You'll earn your keep here for a second.
Yes, happy to participate. Thanks. Nice to see everyone via Zoom again. Yeah, just to add to the legislative update provided by Tim and Paul, beyond the water power program, this is clean energy deployment, climate change mitigation. It's really the number one R&D goal of the Biden administration. They proposed a $400 million clean energy demonstration program. First year, we're expecting to focus on energy storage. But we hope that as this program gets stood up and continues in the future, it will also include water power technologies. There's a lot of changes happening within the Loan Program Office at DOE. Former water power leadership, Mike Reed and Mark Higgins are there in leadership positions. Their door is always open to talk to their former friends or current friends and that they made at when they were with the water power program. They have $24 billion in loan authority. If you have a technology that is on the verge of commercial availability, that may be a program to look at. We're also discussing with other ERE programs and labs related to cross-cut R&D opportunities. There's tremendous opportunity related to advanced materials, offshore cables, moorings, coatings, et cetera, that say the wind program office cares about in their support of offshore wind R&D. So if there's any opportunity that we can leverage other funding pots within ERE to support the industry, that's something we're getting more engaged on. Regarding the Department of Defense activities, there is growing interest in keeping the wave energy test site in Hawaii open beyond the 3 wave energy technology demonstrations that are coming there soon. And that's sponsored by the Navy Facilities Engineering Command, NAVFAC. We've secured funding over the past decade or so to support the operations at the Wave Energy Test Site, which is on a Marine Corps base. I highly recommend a trip, especially during the winter, if you can schedule a tour. We're also working with the Navy Sea Systems Command, NAVSEA, and the Office of Naval Research. They're working on updating their power and energy roadmap for the future. A lot of the PB activities in support of low power applications. The Navy is very interested in power for at-sea surveillance, undersea autonomous underwater vehicle charging, persistent maritime surveillance, that sort of thing for a variety of classified applications. So that's something that we view as a growth opportunity for the marine energy sector, and we're excited to continue our engagement with those folks. The House of Representatives and their appropriations bill and the defense bill, they included a fairly low mark for NAVFAC to continue their support of the Marine Energy Center at $4.5 million. Traditionally, it's been around $10 or $12 million. We expect the Senate number to come in much higher and conference out around the historic level or of $10 or $11 million. In addition, there's also some funding that we expect to come out for some SBIR opportunities. I will also want to highlight that the former head of the Navy Energy Program, Joe Bryan, who's been out to the Wave Energy Test Site, was part of the commissioning ceremony when the additional 2 deep water berths were completed. He is now the energy czar for the Secretary of Defense. So we're looking forward to continuing our discussions with him on things that he can perhaps highlight with the sector. I also want to add that the Chief of Naval Research, the head of the Office of Naval Research, Admiral Silby, he went out to EMEC a few months ago and took a tour of EMEC and went and saw the orbital device. So there is more interest within DoD. I also want to add that the Army Corps of Engineers is also supporting some funding related to a in-stream hydropower project for remote applications. That's exciting that they're showing more interest. That's pretty much all. I also want to add on for the Marine Energy Council, this wasn't touched on by Paul, but we're also engaged in the tax policy debate. Ron Wyden, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, we're trying to create some parity related to tax policy, especially on the production tax credit, where we're currently authorized or eligible for half of what the solar and wind energy industry gets. So fingers crossed, we'll get to where we need to be related to parity with the other renewables. So that's pretty much all of my remarks. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there for the team. I'll pass it back over to Paul. Thanks.
Thanks. And I'll just add, you didn't mention 242, but for Tim's benefit, because we haven't even had a chance to talk about this yet, Tim, but you may or may not have seen that NHA within the past week, 2 weeks, submitted comments to the Water Office, more on the hydro side, who ran that RFI related to the 242 program. And NHA did support requesting that the Water Office look at potentially expanding the 242 program to include future marine energy projects that do have a FERC license. So we can talk more about that in the future, but that is something else that we're looking at, because these are those market pools. Mike Lawson and Bob Thresher's done a great job, and others. I know looking at the historic support that the wind office and wind provided to the wind industry going back to the 1970s, and then looking at price of power and deployment, and then overlaying that with marine energy investments, and just to kind of get a sense of what's required, right? So any of those market pull mechanisms, whether it's parity with PTC or getting 242 to the point where it could also be open to marine energy, any of those things will help beyond just those cooperative agreements that you fill out, you sign with the industry partners. So The last thing I'll close with is before we start opening it up, I'm going to, right or privilege, I'll ask a few questions, but if anyone in the audience has questions, please submit them to us. We will get them through the Zoom chat, and I'll ask them of Tim or Damian, or send one to me as well. But let's touch on just, and Tim mentioned it, the infrastructure bill, the reconciliation package, and then I'll just throw in some debt limit talk for just some real fun. But everyone has seen by now, and Tim talked about it, the reports that the U.S. Senate did earlier this year approve the $550 billion, or it depends on who you ask, but these are real, the new numbers are $550 billion of bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is now over sitting in the House. And Tim mentioned the legislation has a significant potential new resources for marine energy, and that is around $70 and $40 million. So $110 million, and by my books, that's basically one new fiscal year just dropped right on top of the hard work that you already just outlined right there, Tim. So I know you're already challenged on the staff level, so I'm sure this is going to make life so much easier for you. But opportunities abound, right? Potentially. However, that being said, we should not get too excited yet, because I'm sure if anyone follows the daily news, that you've seen all the stress happening here in DC right now. The fate of that bill is definitely in doubt. It's unclear we've been told that there will be a vote in the House on Monday. I don't believe that yet, because I'm not sure they have the votes, and I'm quite convinced Speaker Pelosi would not like to bring that bill to the floor and lose. Although I've been told by people that maybe that has to happen before people will get serious here in town and start negotiating. I'd prefer they get serious before a big loss like that, but this is DC, so it's always interesting. And the reason why that's a challenge is because the infrastructure bill is tied to the $3.5 trillion social infrastructure reconciliation package that the Democrats are now attempting to pull together. And we just saw that the Budget Committee has now announced a markup for that bill on Saturday here in DC. So thank goodness none of us are Budget Committee staffers. Sounds like a great weekend. So we'll see what happens with that. And I got to say, the odds on that package are, as Damian said yesterday, are unknown. So I would not want to put any money down on that. And then finally, the debt ceiling crisis. It seems like we deal with this every couple of years. You would think that someone in Congress would want to get rid of this issue. But just for hard numbers, budget deficit for 21 was $2.54 trillion. I can remember a time when that was not even the total amount of money that the U.S. federal government spent a year. So it's incredible to me that that was our deficit for 1 year. Total U.S. debt now stands at $28.6 trillion. So at some point, we're all going to get busy paying that back. So on that note, I'll just say, hopefully we'll see a lot of these new investments move forward. But you can imagine, and we didn't even talk about this, the need for a CR, and maybe we could have a government shutdown here, and Tim won't even be able to go to work in a week or so. Hopefully that's not the case, but we'll see. So on that note, we have concluded our formal presentation, and with about, I say, 22 minutes left, we're going to move into a little Q&A here. So again, folks, for any of you still out there with us, please feel free to submit your questions, and they'll get to us. I'm going to start off with a couple, Tim, and I guess I want to start with the Secretary of Energy, the fact that she got a chance to hang out with, Senator King asked her to come and see the ORPC folks specifically last week. She went up to Alaska with Senator Murkowski several weeks before then, also met with ORPC. I know that I believe the village leader of Igiagi went down and spoke on a panel, and Senator Murkowski and the secretary were able to meet with her, which for me is fantastic. And so, you mentioned several other projects, and you and I have talked for years about how we just need to really get some action in the water, and that it could really make a big change, right? And so I guess maybe you could just talk a little bit about what since you have in the building, so to speak, even though you're not in the building, of how, what impacts that's having. What feedback have you heard? Is the secretary coming away from that saying, hey, this is pretty cool stuff? Is this going to? Are we going to be able to take this to the next level? Because I'm driving at getting more money for the program, right? And internally, but future budget requests. And so I'm hoping that that she came away impressed. And I'll just leave it at that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, we've seen. Well, I mentioned at the beginning, we certainly have a lot of support from the new administration. They're certainly supportive of renewable energy. Now, in the past, we've had other administrations that are supportive of renewable energy, but when it comes to marine energy, then that's where they kind of could go one way or the other, depending on what they see the value of marine energy is. How focused are they just electrons on the grid in the near term versus the bigger picture. And everything that I've seen so far is the current administration, they're open to that bigger picture. They're open to having the discussion and seeing where green energy can be of value, not just to the grid, but to all these other non-grid applications we're talking about. She certainly is listening, speaking about the secretary and really all of her managers down the line. We actually, WPTO directly, got to meet with the Secretary of Energy shortly, after she took office. She went around and met with the different programs and hear directly from us. So that's the only time I can ever remember actually having a sit-down meeting with a secretary to talk about our work. So that
awesome.
alone shows you how serious she is and learning and supportive she is of renewables. With that said, they still want to see projects in the water. They want to see near-term impacts, but they're open to the discussion of in particular, remote communities, underserved communities. That fits within the administration's goals as well, and supporting underserved communities, environmental justice, DE&I. So in particular, ORPC and serving some of those remote communities in Alaska. Yes, that is a huge opportunity that they're supportive of. So, I mean, as far as administration, they're still new. I mean, we're not even a year in yet. They're still learning us. They're still understanding the technology, but it's clear that there's an opportunity there. They're willing to listen and they're engaging.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. I think we heard that Vernon's on the next panel, right? Is that Jonathan Colby maybe speaking? I don't want to steal his thunder, but since I have you here now, and since I know that you just hired Elaine Buck from EMEC, who was overseeing the certification process, maybe you could talk a little bit about international standards and how you see that's important for the technology developers, and just give your views on that. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. I definitely don't want to steal too much of Jonathan's thunder because knowing him, he's definitely going to talk about standards and the work that EMEC did for them. But yeah, we, first, shout out to Elaine and having the opportunity to hire Elaine. We were thrilled to bring her on board. I think she's
great
probably
hire.
Listening maybe out there. Yeah, great hire, big win.
Yeah, we're big fans, so good, nice job.
So we're hoping that she can bring her knowledge of all the testing they've done over at EMEC and applying these certifications to the program. And we do want to make that not such a one-off. When you look at around the technologies here in the U.S., in particular the projects that we're supporting, we don't want that to be a one-of-a-kind or a unique situation because we truly, without a doubt, see the value and standards in having standard-based design and testing. That's the only way you're really going to de-risk from an investor standpoint, de-risk the technologies and increase investor confidence is through standards and certifications.
I can confirm that Elaine's listening.
Oh, there she is. All shucks. Yep.
We are big fans, Elaine, and we're really, really happy that you decided to come to join us here in DC. So welcome aboard. So in your role at IEA OES, Tim, you get to see quite a bit. You get the international view of different efforts of supporting marine energy development. I thought maybe you could spend a couple minutes just talking about lessons learned, what you see going on internationally. Sometimes we're viewed as being behind others, but I know that you have an interesting perspective on that. So would you mind sharing that for a minute or two?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, just when you and I were chatting, and then you brought up earlier on this panel market incentives, market polls, especially earlier in the wind days. And yes, when you see market incentives and then you see production tax credits. Anytime you see that in an industry, you're going to see a increase, a spike in technology deployment. What you might not necessarily see, though, is true technology advancement. And it's just one other way to look at it. I'm not saying that I wouldn't welcome market incentives and market pulls, but that's certainly one of the big distinguishing factors of what you see in other parts of the world, especially over in Europe and UK, that have had market incentives for the marine energy industry. And a lot of people point to those as why the U.S. might be lagging in some areas of measure compared to some of our counterparts. But in talking to some of my colleagues over in other places of the world that have some of those market incentives, sometimes I've had discussions with some where they're actually they see the benefit of the way the U.S. is doing it, with not necessarily having market incentives as the driving factor. So without market incentives, the only thing you can do is compete actually on LCOE. You have to put the effort and the funding into the technologies themselves to increase the performance and reduce costs and get them on a level that can compete with other technologies. And the benefit there is well, with the market incentives, market pull, that's certainly a short-term gain, but it's also risky. If those go away, all of a sudden the technologies don't make economical sense, and you have developers, project developers, that is just walking away. Whereas if you're really focusing on the technologies, bringing them down to being able to compete on their own, then you're not as susceptible to those wins and the risk of market incentives and market pulls. So again, two sides of the coin. It's not all bad. The way not having a market incentive pull just takes a little longer, but in the end, it could be the best approach.
Interesting. I found that fascinating, so I'm glad we got a chance to share that with everyone else. A question from the audience. Can you talk a bit about how the WPTO is collaborating with other DOE offices, and I would stretch that out if you want to go beyond DOE, on complementary efforts with, for example, offshore wind or maritime transportation decarbonization? And that's from George Bonner. So George, thanks for joining us today.
Mm-hmm. Hey, George. The wind one's a little easier to articulate, at least quickly to start. For those that have known us for a while know that we used to be the wind and water program. So we used to be one office. So we're not, relatively speaking, that far removed from being one office. So we still have really good colleagues over in the wind office. They know us very well, us and our technologies. We know them and their technologies very well. So that just lends itself to communicating and collaborating, coordinating all the time. As far as just sharing information, sharing lessons learned, but also sharing, maybe common pain points that might be relevant. So anytime we see something that might be interest to them and vice versa, we share that. Now, actually translating that from, just sharing information to actually doing work, that's where it always gets a little harder. We all tend to work in our silos. We do the best we can to break out of those silos. That was always a big area of emphasis of Alejandro. So him now moving up to be the Deputy Assistant Secretary overseeing all the renewable energies, he's made that a point. And so he's helping us and encouraging us to get out of our silos. I think you'll see more and more of it. But we've had a few projects. I mean, a couple just to name right now. We have a new project out of that university R&D FOA that we just awarded to Tufts, and they're looking at co-locating marine energy and wind technologies. We have a project with Bessie that's a joint project with wind and water, as well as fossil energy and office electricity, and with Bessie themselves looking funding the Ocean Energy Institute, where marine energy and wind are working together and providing support for safety issues and concerns around particularly the oil and gas industry, but ocean energy or work in the ocean at large. But yeah, we need to do better. As far as the maritime decarbonization and transportation industry, that's definitely picking up a lot of steam. We're seeing a lot of talk and chatter and direction from Congress to get more involved in that. We have MNO that's supporting that effort from PNNL, Dave Hume. He spoke yesterday, talked a little bit about that. So if you're interested to hear more, definitely talk to Dave or go back and listen to his talk yesterday. But we're just starting to figure out how we can work together and work better, especially in the maritime transportation decarbonization space. Because this is a little bit of me personally speaking, but I think that's going to be one of the biggest areas of focus moving forward. Kind of looking across the U.S. and federal government as a whole, that's a big area of opportunity, and just hasn't really been. It's been lacking in the research to date to try to tackle those huge issues.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, we're going to enter our speed round now, Tim. Speed round. 10 minutes left in the session, so your answers maybe a minute or two for each question. Okay. No, you're doing great. I want to try to squeeze in what we have here.
Don't forget to hit the questions for you too, though.
I don't know. Well, I got a few in, and so but Rich, I'm going to give a shout out to Richie from EMEC is with us here. So
hey,
thanks, Richie. Nice to see you through the Zoom world. Richie asks, with those cost reductions in mind, how do we let the market capture all additional added benefits of marine energy not represented in LCOE? Great question. This maybe gets to your PBE activities distributed.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. So with the cost reductions in mind, like the cost reductions that we're targeting, how do we let the market capture all additional added benefits?
Yeah, or how are you able to leverage, right, those other benefits that maybe are, I've heard Hoyt speak eloquently about how marine energy, there was a spot for wind before it was really cost competitive, right? I don't know. Do you?
Yeah. So I would say a few things. On the grid, I think for this discussion, so grid and PBE are a little separate. So for the grid, we've been working with NREL and PNNL over the last couple of years on what we call the grid value report, and actually that should be going out publicly any day now. Rich, I don't know if you've seen those guys talk about that over the last couple of years at conferences and workshops. If you're not familiar with it, I'll definitely get you in touch with those guys and certainly get you the report when it goes out. But it attempts to articulate some of those benefits beyond just LCOE of what the value of marine energy brings to the grid. So what are some of the seasonal benefits, complementary benefits, especially those areas that are trying to get to 100% renewable, where can marine energy in particular play in getting that last 10%, that hard last 10% to capture. So there's a number of other benefits of non-value benefits, or trying to quantify those benefits just beyond cost of electricity and factor that into the equation. So that's why, trying to keep this quick, I'll get you in touch with those guys if you haven't talked to them. And then on the PBE space, what we're trying to do is get away from LCOE altogether, because it's really not about the energy. It's what are you doing with that energy? So one example, ocean observation. It's not about providing, a couple watts or 10 watts or 100 watts to the device that's going to go out and do your mission. It's what data is that mission collecting? What are you going to do with that data, and how much is that data worth, and what are you willing to pay for that data? So when we're talking about these non-grid applications and those end-use markets, that's the conversation that we need to have, and we're having. And yes, we're getting a lot of traction in that area.
Fantastic. Great answer. So nice to see Sharice's name pop up here. A shout out to Sharice, all that great work on Packway finally coming true. So thank you, Sharice. She asked if there's any thought being given to funding resource agency staff to work on offshore renewables, as in getting dedicated NIMS regional staff funded. Is that possible? Is that realistic? That's probably going to become a bigger issue, and I know on the hydro side, I think that's something that can be done. But, as we start going down the road of actually seeing real projects, going through the FERC process, that's probably something that could be helpful. So thanks for the question, Sharice.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's not something I've considered yet. I'll never say something can't be done. If that's something that we want to look into, especially our office, WPTO, is always open to finding unique solutions to solve a problem. So if that's a problem or a need that we want to tackle, let's talk. It's not something I've considered yet, but I don't see. I'm willing to see if it can be done before I say no, it can't.
Fantastic. That's what we love about you, Tim. That's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit? I had a question from Jason about if you're willing or can share a little bit more about the staffing challenges I met before, or is that something we just leave best unsaid and we continue to noodle on it? Maybe you could just talk about it for a sec.
Yeah.
You've done a lot with less,
certainly, yeah.
right? You've done a lot with less.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the previous administration, I mean, it wasn't technically a hiring freeze. I mean, there technically was a hiring freeze right when the previous administration took over, but that quickly evaporated, and then it just became a very high threshold to cross in order to get new hires. So it was, it kind of worked as a hiring freeze. So over the previous 4 years, as we lost people, we weren't really able to backfill from the federal standpoint, federal hires. And as you saw with our budget, it just kept going up and up and up. So yes, we were continuing being asked to do more with less. Under the new administration, it certainly isn't the case, but it takes time. It takes time to hire up. They're still, like I said, they're still understanding us, who we are, what we do, trying to understand what the right level of FTEs are for each of the offices. What I will say is, if that infrastructure bill does go through, and this is just me talking, I have no idea, but I'm hopeful that could be an impetus for hiring. And the reason I say that is the last time I can remember anything similar to that was the Recovery Act. Yep. And that was back in 2009, and that certainly was an impetus for a huge hiring boom for the federal government. That was really the last time I can remember we at DOE had a big hiring boom, and if the infrastructure bill is something of that magnitude goes through, I'm just hopeful that would lead to additional hires and maybe actually get us to even, just get us to even. I'm not even looking for a surplus of hires. I just would love to get even, but I don't know. Again, that's just me talking. But regardless, what we have done is when we do get an opportunity to hire, we know that is absolutely crucial. So we go out, we search the world and get the best people we can, like lame duck.
Nice. Excellent. Okay, we're down to the final 3 minutes. So Sharice had us a quick follow-up. Is there a federal nexus there? If there is a federal nexus, there is a potential to use the Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act to drive environmental coordination and transfer funding. This would be project by project basis. So it sounds like we probably need to have a follow-up with Sharice and figure out what she's got for us. So let's do that. Okay. So, or she says maybe Steph asked that question. I don't know. I'll figure that out. Online questions, very difficult. Last one for me, and I think this will be our last one, Tim, is could you just spend a minute talking about foundational research? I know that when we looked at the budget request this year for 22, there was not much mention of foundational research, but as you've seen, there's a lot of support from the Hill for it, $20 to $24 million worth, right? So maybe you could spend a minute talking about that, and then we'll wrap up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the questions in there too. So I think the question that you just read was Steph replying to Sharice, or at least making comments to Sharice.
There you go. Got it. Thank you for explaining.
Which is great because I wasn't sure what that was. I wasn't sure how to answer that. But
1 minute, foundational research.
One minute. Go for it. I mentioned it both in the highlights for 21 and kind of looking forward for 22. Foundational research, I mean, it says it in its name. It's foundational. We certainly need that type of work to lay the base out the next generation ideas, concepts, technologies that we want to transfer out to industry. And yes, it's at the universities, it's at our national labs, it's at our research organizations across the country. In the past, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but probably one of the biggest ones I could point to is just limited funds. When you're talking about a $40, $50, $60 million program, that can only go so far. And
for sure.
But now that the program's growing, yes, it does provide an opportunity that we can have a bigger, more robust foundational research program within the program, and do so on a more repetitive basis, transparent basis. And that is the intent going forward. I mean, obviously, I don't know even what 22 is going to bring because we don't know the budgets yet. But whether it's $106 million at the House for marine energy or $142 at the Senate, there's certainly room to carve that out in there. So we'll be looking to kind of set up that program now that the UMERC is on board. That was one of the big reasons and motivations to bring them on board to help us think through that. So it's going to take some time. That'd be maybe the last thing I'll say, just a word of caution. It is going to take some time before we really get into this repetitive nature. UMERC just got started, so we want to get them time to get their feet under them, get some of these other university R&D, foundational R&D projects started, get them, give them a chance to execute on their awards, feed all of our projects feeding into the UMERC and passing in information and forming the program. So it'll take some time, but we have those pieces in place. We have the building blocks in place, and without a doubt, it will be a focus going forward, a high priority going forward.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate that. And obviously, my work was working with a couple of the centers. We're really looking forward to how that could really fire them up and do a lot more work moving forward. So thank you very much, Tim. Damian, appreciate your participation here too. It's been a great discussion. I see Jason is joining us, so I know we're getting ready to get the hook. So once again, Tim, great work. Thanks to you and the entire Water Power Technologies office team.
Yep.
We really appreciate all the fantastic work. So with that, Jason, we're going to drop the mic and we're going to leave the building. So thank you very much, Jason, for all your great work in pulling this together.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
And Tim, you guys, great presentation today. And let me just say how much I know the entire sector appreciates the work that you guys do. You've been at the center of this sector for many years. You've been here since the beginning. And we are very, very appreciative of all the work that you guys do to make this happen, whether it's on the lobbying side or Tim at the Department of Energy. We truly do appreciate your hard work. So thank you for presenting today, and let's keep it up. Looking forward to the pretty exciting next 3 years. Huh? Let's keep the pressure on and make hay while the sun shines. So with that, we're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll be back at 2:30 Pacific time for our final panel today, looking at steel in the water. So join us.
Great topic.
Agreed. Great way to finish the day. So
awesome.
Take a break. Join us back here in 15 minutes, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing everyone. Take care.
Thank you.